Almost a year after devastating flash floods claimed 9 lives and destroyed more than 200 homes in Travis County, KXAN obtained 911 calls made during the catastrophic event. This week on Inside the Investigation, KXAN Investigative Reporter Grace Reader explains what the calls tell us about the critical moments when people called for help and how it compares to the response in neighboring Kerr County. Welcome to Inside the Investigation. I'm Kelly Wiley, and I'm here with one of our newest investigative reporters, Grace Reader. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, and we're so happy to have you on the team. Grace has been a rock star in our newsroom forever, but she's new to our investigative team, and we're very excited to have you.
Thank you.
All right, so you've already been doing amazing investigations anyway, but this is definitely one of them, and I want to talk about what made you want to request these calls in the first place?
First and foremost, I think these calls really told us the initial response from Travis County. What information were they getting early on? What were people telling the county about infrastructure that had moved, including the Sandy Creek Bridge? What were they telling people, what were they telling dispatch about where people were in trouble? What information was the county getting when? And then how did they respond to that information? So that's really what we were looking for initially. But I think these calls also really paint a picture of how dire this was for people in our community as this event was occurring.
Yeah, so much of what we're trying to figure out, I think, after these events is we're trying to evaluate the response, right? Because natural disasters will happen again, and every time we ask questions, we could be getting closer to what gaps there are in the system. So that's what makes your report to me so interesting. Okay, so Travis County released these 911 calls on May 29th, and we're gonna get into the process and why we're just now hearing this, but talk to us about how many calls you received and what you learned.
We ended up receiving 4 calls. We went through quite a bit of a process. So there were about 200 calls that were made on July 5th in Travis County. We originally requested all of them. We only got 4 of them. We'll break that down in a moment, but the 4 calls that we did get were the first 911 call that was made that night. We wanted to know what was the first indication to Travis County that something was going wrong. I've actually since had time to speak with the man who made that first 911 call, and he was a little bit surprised to hear that he was the first, but his story is very interesting. He was one of the people who first ran into a low water crossing and had his car get stuck, start to float. And so those were the first calls Travis County started to get, and that was a good example of that, which is why we requested that call. We also got calls from Travis County, including someone who was calling because a sheriff's deputy had been washed away in the floodwaters. We got a call from someone who had found a body on their property in the Sandy Creek area. And another one where it was the first call where someone notified the county that that bridge that cut off that entire community had shifted several feet.
It's always so illuminating, even just hearing that breakdown of the story behind each call, because we cover these things and you hope it doesn't affect you and that it doesn't impact you, but to hear about horrific things that people have to experience, finding a body on your land or your property, a human, I can't imagine how that left that person feeling and the impact of that. So you previously got a dispatch log from Travis County, which is why you could kind of tell how many were actually made. How long it took, you were trying to figure out how long it took for dispatch to answer the phone, how many calls they were getting and what response. Remind us of what you learned just in that log.
The log was really telling and really interesting. Travis County compiled a lot of information about all of the calls that they believe were tied to that flooding event. And we saw everything from some of the pinch points where they had a tremendous number of people calling. Of those roughly 200 calls, many of them, 60 of them, happened between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m. And so we also started to see that it took longer for dispatch to pick up the phone. This is a weekend, this is a holiday, and so there are not that many dispatchers that were working that night, and so you start to see the response of people actually answering the phone slow down in that 1 hour. But you also see call after call after call after call from all different parts of this area that was experiencing the flooding. It was people stuck on roofs, people stuck on docks, people, washed away. I think that really stood out to me was that you saw just the tremendous number of calls between specifically 3 and 4 a.m. and how difficult it was for these dispatchers to get to everybody.
So how are families and the people in the 911 calls reacting? You laid out these 4 scenarios. What are you learning from them?
It was interesting to talk to the man who made that first 911 call. He actually believes that he was rescued by the volunteer fire chief who ended up being washed away later and hasn't been found thus far. And so his story is really interesting. He talked to me about how surprised everybody was. No one in his family, when he left for the night, said, like, it's gonna rain really hard, be careful. Like, no, it wasn't on anybody's mind that this was the severity of what this was gonna be. And he also talked to me a lot about, because neighboring Kerr County had such destruction and devastation and there were children involved, Travis County doesn't get as much emphasis. It hasn't gotten as much coverage from the media. And so he mentioned to me quite a few times when I first spoke to him on the phone about just sort of how dramatic this was, but how it doesn't maybe feel like that in the shadow of what happened in Kerr County.
Right.
But he drove into a low water crossing as he was driving at night, didn't see it, got stuck, called 911. He was there for a while. First responders originally couldn't get to him, so you can hear him in the call saying, I see a sheriff's deputy, why aren't they coming to me? Right. Dispatch had to say, we're waiting for the right folks to arrive with the right equipment. Those folks did arrive, and again, he believes he was saved by that fire chief who ultimately passed away.
So why does he believe that? Just because of the proximity, or what makes him think that?
And he saw the coverage afterwards, so he did get home and then saw that that fire chief was missing, recognized him from coverage that he was seeing on the news, and just thought, wow. So it was several hours later that that fire chief we know washed away from the same area.
Wow. I can't imagine how he must feel, even trying to connect the dots in his head. Wow. Okay, so you said there were 200 of these calls, and you know that from the log, but you only got 4. And in comparison, we know in Kerr County, we were able to get all of the calls, hundreds of them. Why weren't they able to release, or why did they not release the rest to you here in Travis County?
Yeah, so I think the difference in Kerr County and Travis County was Kerr County how it was described to me was they had a much smaller staff to handle all of those PIRs that were coming in for those calls. They had a significant number of calls as well. Travis County had the staff to do these PIRs. It's a much bigger county. They have the staff to do that, and they had fewer calls. So the difference between Kerr and Travis County was that Kerr County basically said, we can't release these because we don't have the
ability to redact them.
Right. Yeah. And so that folks know, those redactions are to take out sensitive things, to take out private information from people, to take out legally sensitive information when we're trying to get things released to the public. So, as you know, the state stepped in and said, you need to release all of these unredacted then, and that's what Kerr County did. Because Travis County did have the staff to do it, that was not their argument. They said, to get all of these calls, it's going to cost you roughly $4,000. We did not have $4,000 to spend on that public information request, and so that's why we requested the log, because I thought, well, okay, if we can't get all of these calls, if we can't pay to get that PIR, we do want to go through and pick out exactly which calls might be really important for our viewers to hear. So that was how we pared it down. We pared it down to 12 calls then. It went through a significant process between Travis County, between the AG's office, trying to figure out what of those calls could be released to us and not. And in the end, after the county and the AG worked together to determine that, we only received 4 of those 12 calls.
And it's so interesting, and I think it highlights the barriers to transparency, right? Like the Texas Public Information Act, the concept of it is that anyone, not just journalists, not just lawyers, but anyone,
right.
These are your records, and down to a Post-it note, you have access to it. But there are these exceptions, and there are these workarounds that we see a lot of the time, right? It is baffling when you kind of hear the juxtaposition that, the concept for Kerr County was, if you can't redact it, that doesn't preclude you from releasing it. You still have to figure it out and release it. Sorry that you don't have the manpower to do these other redactions. But then on the other hand, if you do have the manpower and the staff to actually get it done, it then leads to kind of a a crazy invoice.
Us getting 4 calls instead of 200
Right.
of them. Yeah.
And I think too, we had these discussions too when we were talking about Kerr County, that we have to figure out, this is a traumatic event. What are we taking from this? Like, what are we learning from this information? And in regards to Kerr, it's just like what you highlighted. We realized just what a bare bones staff they were working with in the backdrop of an extreme catastrophe for any area. Here's this small team trying to get help to all these different places. It can be illuminating what's on them and what it can lay out for timeline and resources and what they were able to do. So I hope that at some point we're able to get more insight from the calls, but the fact that you were able to get us some is amazing. Okay, so I guess give us, what do you think the top line of all of this is for you? Because you were a part of the reporting on Kerr County. I remember when we got those calls in and we were all trying to log and listen.
Yeah.
And
We listened to hours of calls.
and having to take breaks because it was so devastating, watching people scared and panic, and in some cases having their last conversation of their life. What did you glean from working on that versus this?
I think there were a lot of similarities. No staff to answer these phones. It was just a couple people in dispatch. They were saying very similar things in Kerr County and in Travis County. Can you get to higher ground? Do you have the option to get out of a window, to get out of a door? What options do you have? And if not, collecting all the information that they could and then needing to move on to the next call. But like you said, these calls were extremely difficult to listen to. We only got 4 calls from Travis County, but I also received a call from a family member who lost several people in the Travis County flood. They received the call that it's her brother made, the last call that he made before he passed away. And that call was 5 minutes and extremely difficult to listen to. You hear him at first calmly explaining, there's water on the outside, I can't open this door, I can't open these windows. And then you hear him, you hear water, you hear him drown in the call, and it's very difficult to hear. So I think overall, the underlying message was that this was a situation where counties did not have the dispatch staffing because it does not seem that folks knew that this was coming. The situation that they were being faced with and the calls that they were getting were extremely challenging. People were panicking. They were in some cases, near death. And in Travis County, it was the same. To see that log and see some of the calls that people made in their final moments, that's a really tough position for dispatch to be in. It's their only lifeline for some folks.
Yeah. Well, I know you have more questions. I know you'll continue to dig in on this. We're coming up on the anniversary of this horrible event. And I just appreciate your reporting and thank you for being here and on our team.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly.
You can watch all new episodes of Inside the Investigation on the KXAN Plus app every Friday starting at 1 p.m. Just search for KXAN on your preferred streaming devices, such as Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. You can also listen to KXAN's Investigative Podcast, where we feature audio versions of our weekly Inside the Investigation episodes. You can find new episodes every Saturday morning wherever you get podcasts. Just search for KXAN Investigates.